The modern summer is defined by a specific, relentless soundtrack, the mechanical roar of the air conditioner. It is a machine designed to fight a war against the sun, yet for millions of homeowners it is a war being lost. Inside, the thermostat might mock you with a reading of 72 degrees, but the air feels heavy, pressing against your skin with a persistent, invisible weight. If you were to climb a ladder right now and push through that square hatch in your ceiling, you would not be entering a storage space. You would be stepping into a kiln. In the peak of July, while you try to sleep, a silent, black reservoir of energy sits just inches above your head, often reaching temperatures in excess of 140 degrees Fahrenheit. This is the great irony of contemporary architecture. The space designed to protect your sanctuary from the elements has been engineered to bake it from the inside out. Historically, the attic was never intended to be part of the living envelope. It was a sacrificial buffer, a layer of atmospheric insulation meant to take the punishment of the sun's radiation so the rooms below could remain habitable. But in the mid-20th century, a fundamental shift occurred. As builders prioritized rapid construction and airtight seals, the American home was transformed into a thermal trap. We stopped letting our houses breathe and started relying on massive, power-hungry compressors to brute force our comfort. This shift created what physicists call a thermal battery, a massive pile of wood, drywall, and trapped air that absorbs energy all day and radiates it back into your bedroom all night long. Meanwhile, in the quiet, rolling hills of Lancaster County and the rural stretches of Holmes County, a different reality persists. Here, in the heart of Amish and Mennonite communities, the mercury climbs just as high and the humidity is just as stifling. Yet the upstairs bedrooms of these 200-year-old farmhouses remain eerily, impossibly cool. There is no humming compressor. There is no spinning utility meter. There is only a centuries-old mastery of thermodynamics that most of us have been conditioned to forget. This is not about a primitive lifestyle. It is about a sophisticated understanding of how air moves and how heat transfers through solid objects. The secret to this cooling power is not found in high-tech materials or digital sensors. It is buried in a forgotten university extension archive from 1943, a document that proves we are paying thousands of dollars to solve a problem that can be addressed with roughly $4 in, and 60 minutes of focused labor. This is a story of lost autonomy. We have been sold a version of efficiency that benefits the utility provider and the shingle manufacturer while leaving the homeowner helpless against the heat. To reclaim that comfort, we must stop viewing our houses as static boxes and start seeing them as living, breathing lungs. We must understand the hidden engine on the roofline and the simple, humble fabric that can break the back of radiant heat. To grasp the architectural genius of a Lancaster County farmhouse, one must look past the hand-hewn siding and focus on the roofline. Perched at the highest peak is a structure often dismissed by modern eyes as a mere ornament, the cupola. In contemporary suburban design, these are usually hollow plastic shells, non-functional aesthetic additions glued to a garage to mimic a sense of history. But in the 1700s, the cupola was a critical piece of hardware, passive atmospheric engine. It is a wooden tower with louvered openings on all four sides, but its true power lies hidden beneath the shingles. To the Amish, this is not a decoration. It is the exhaust port of a vertical shaft that extends deep into the heart of the home, acting as the primary lung for the entire structure. The science driving this system is known to physicists as buoyancy-driven ventilation, or the stack effect. It relies on a basic principle of fluid dynamics. Hot air is less dense than cool air. As the sun's radiation strikes the roof deck, the air molecules inside the attic begin to vibrate with energy, expanding and rising. In a modern, sealed house, this heat is trapped against the ridge, creating a pressurized pocket of stagnant fire that eventually migrates downward through the ceiling. In a traditional farmhouse, however, the cupola provides an immediate escape route. As the heated air exits through the louvers, it creates a zone of low pressure behind it. This is the thermal siphon that defines the entire system. Like a chimney for a hearth, the cupola pulls the hottest air out of the building's crown, creating a vacuum that must be filled. This design was not an American invention, but a survival strategy imported from the Palatinate region of Germany and the Alpine slopes of Switzerland. Immigrants in the 18th century brought with them a sophisticated understanding of the breadth of the house. They recognized that a building without airflow was a building destined to rot and overheat. The cupola works in tandem with a vertical shaft, a clear, unobstructed corridor that often reaches down to the second-floor hallway. This creates a continuous column of air that moves 24 hours a day without a single moving part. It is a machine made of nothing but void and temperature differentials. The effectiveness of this system is further amplified by the Bernoulli principle. When even a slight breeze passes over the louvered slats of the cupola, it creates a drop in external pressure, which further accelerates the draw of air from within the house. By placing the intake windows on the shaded lower levels of the home, the Amish ensure that the makeup air being pulled in is as cool as possible. By contrast, modern building codes prioritized sealing the envelope to preserve mechanically cooled air, inadvertently turning our attics into thermal silos. The Amish never fell for this trap. They understood that the most powerful cooling system on Earth is the atmosphere itself, provided you give it a clear path to work. While the cupola manages the air, there is a second, more insidious form of heat that most homeowners are completely defenseless against: radiant energy. To understand why your second floor feels like a furnace even with thick insulation, you must understand the physics of the infrared hammer. Most modern insulation, like fiberglass or cellulose, is designed to combat conductive heat that moves through solid contact. It is excellent at keeping warmth in during a blizzard, but it is remarkably porous to the electromagnetic radiation pouring off a sun-drenched roof deck. When your shingles reach 160 degrees, they do not just get hot. They begin to glow in the infrared spectrum, firing waves of energy downward in straight lines. This energy ignores the air and slams into whatever is below it, heating your ceiling drywall until it becomes a massive radiator plate positioned directly over your bed. In the Amish farmsteads of Ohio, this invisible assault is met with a solution so humble it borders on the absurd: untreated cotton muslin. For roughly $4, a homeowner can purchase enough of this plain, breathable fabric to cover the ridge of a standard attic. The technique involves nailing strips of this cotton across the underside of the roof rafters, creating a secondary skin just below the wood. At first glance, a thin sheet of fabric seems like a laughable defense against a 140-degree attic. But its power is not found in its R-value, it is found in its biology. Cotton is a hygroscopic fiber, meaning it naturally absorbs microscopic amounts of moisture from the humid night air. As the sun rises and the roof begins its daily thermal climb, the physics of evaporative cooling take over. As the radiant heat strikes the cotton, it triggers a phase change in the moisture trapped within the fibers. Before that heat can reach your living space, it must first expend its energy, evaporating the water from the muslin. This creates a microscopic cool zone right at the source of the thermal invasion. It is the same biological hack used by the human body through sweat, or the cooling sensation of a wet bandana around a traveler's neck. This is where modern building science often misses the mark. By focusing entirely on thick, stagnant blanket insulation, we have ignored the dynamic potential of phase change cooling. The Amish did not need a PhD in thermodynamics to observe this. They simply watched how the dew stayed on the linen in the morning, and how that linen stayed cool to the touch, even when the rafters were burning. They transitioned from linen to cotton as a matter of colonial economics in the 19th century, but the principle remained unchanged. It is a $4 shield that does not just block the heat, it consumes it. By installing this breathable barrier, you are not just adding a layer, you are installing a passive evaporative heat sink that works in silence, fueled by nothing but the natural cycle of day and night. The transition from the breathable farmhouse to the modern sealed box was not a move toward superior engineering. It was a move toward industrial convenience. In the 1960s and 70s, the American building industry underwent a psychological and economic shift. We were entering the era of the all-electric home, a vision of the future where the environment was something to be conquered, not collaborated with. Builders began to favor airtight construction, wrapping houses in plastic and stuffing attics with the most cost-effective bulk insulation available. They punched in a few undersized soffit vents and a single ridge vent. then relied on the brute force of oversized air conditioning units to make the space habitable. This was the birth of the sealed box Philosophia design choice that effectively transformed the attic from a protective buffer into a thermal liability. There is a dark chemistry to this design. Asphalt shingles, the most common roofing material in North America, are particularly vulnerable to the stagnant heat of a sealed attic. When air cannot move, the temperature of the roof deck can climb to nearly 170 degrees Fahrenheit. This extreme heat causes the asphalt to soften and the protective mineral granules to loosen. More importantly, it accelerates a process called thermal shock. Without proper ventilation, the shingles bake from the underside during the day and then experience rapid cooling at night. This cycle of expansion and contraction causes the volatile oils in the asphalt to evaporate prematurely, leading to brittle, curled shingles that fail in half their intended lifespan. A roof that should have protected a family for 30 years is often rendered useless in 15. This premature failure creates a billion-dollar windfall for the roofing industry, but the utility companies benefit even more. When your attic reaches 140 degrees, your air conditioner is forced to run 4 to 5 hours longer every day just to combat the radiant heat pushing through your ceiling. A standard 3-ton unit consumes roughly 3,500 watts of power. Multiply those extra hours by millions of homes, and you begin to see why the building industry has very little incentive to return to the passive wisdom of the Amish. The system was quietly redesigned to ensure a steady stream of revenue for energy providers and equipment manufacturers. By the 1970s, building code committees, often funded or influenced by these very industries, began to reclassify functional elements like the cupola as ornamental. They replaced active, buoyancy-driven airflow with mechanical power vents that fail after a few seasons or consume even more electricity. This was not a conspiracy in the traditional sense, but a systemic alignment of profit. We were sold a version of modernity that made us fundamentally dependent on a repair and replace cycle. We traded the autonomy of a self-ventilating roof for a lifetime of utility bills and service contracts. Reclaiming the breath of the house is more than a DIY project. It is an act of economic defiance against a system that profits from your discomfort. In the dusty basement of the Pennsylvania State University Agricultural Extension Archives lies a document that the modern HVAC industry would likely prefer remained forgotten. It is Farm Bulletin number 284, published in 1946 by a professor named Walter F. Schaff, titled Natural Cooling Methods for the Pennsylvania Farmhouse. This 28-page manual serves as the Rosetta Stone for understanding how the Amish manipulated air pressure without the use of electricity. Schaff wasn't just observing tradition. He was documenting a sophisticated thermal physics experiment that had been running in Lancaster and Berks counties for over a century. His findings, along with a 1943 University of Florida study, proved that a properly configured farmhouse could achieve internal temperature drops of nearly 20 degrees Fahrenheit through purely passive means. The centerpiece of Schaff's research was a phenomenon he called the summer kitchen draft. In traditional Pennsylvania Dutch architecture, the kitchen was almost universally positioned on the north side of the home. It was designed as a semi-autonomous zone with a specific geometry, a tall, narrow window placed directly opposite a heavy door. To the untrained eye, this was simply a layout of convenience. To Schaff, it was a pressure differential pump. When the woman of the house began her morning baking, the heat from the wood stove would rise rapidly, forced toward the high northern window. As this hot air exited the building, it created a low-pressure vacuum. This void was then filled by pulling denser, cooler air from the south, facing parlor windows, drawing a refreshing breeze through the entire living space. The data Schaff collected in July 1945 was staggering. On a stagnant 92-degree day near Ephrata, Pennsylvania, he recorded a steady 2.5-mile-per-hour draft, moving through a farmhouse parlor completely independent of the wind. The house was essentially using its own cooking heat as fuel to power a ventilation cycle. It is a concept that feels counterintuitive to the modern mind, using heat to create cold. Yet, the physics are undeniable. By creating a controlled thermal column in one specific room, The Amish were able to flush the entire volume of the house's air multiple times per hour. The tragedy of our modern era is that this capability is still within our reach, yet we have been conditioned to believe that cooling requires a complex machine. Schaaf's work proves that the same effect can be replicated today for approximately 4 cents. By activating a single burner on a modern range at its lowest setting for 40 minutes, and strategically opening windows on opposite ends of the home, a homeowner can trigger the same vacuum effect documented in 1945. It is a method that turns the house into a self-regulating organism. This wasn't just folk wisdom. It was an early form of fluid engineering that prioritized human comfort over corporate revenue. The journey back to a cooler, more autonomous home begins in a place most of us have not visited in years, the dark, dusty corners of the gable. If you live in a residence built between 1940 and 1990, you likely have these triangular vents at the peaks of your attic. They are the vestigial remains of the farmhouse lung, yet in the vast majority of modern homes, they have been rendered useless. They are frequently clogged with decades of lead paint, bird nests, or the blown-in insulation that a well-meaning contractor installed without a thought for airflow. To reclaim your home's thermal sovereignty, you must first clear these paths. This is not merely maintenance, it is a restoration of the building's original intent. By cleaning these vents and replacing the degraded screens with a high-flow aluminum or stainless mesh, you are re-enabling a 24-hour exhaust system that operates without an off switch. But there is a psychological hurdle to overcome before you pick up the flashlight. For 40 years, homeowners have been conditioned by a marketing machine to believe that a sealed house is an efficient house. We have been told to spray foam every crack and staple plastic vapor barriers to every surface, effectively wrapping our living spaces in a non-breathable bag. This philosophy works in a sterile laboratory environment, but in the reality of a humid American summer, it creates a stagnant thermal mass. The wood in your attic becomes a heat battery that cannot discharge. Breaking this cycle requires a shift in perspective, moving away from the sealed box and toward the breathing organism. As Bishop Eli Miller once noted in the quiet of a Holmes County kitchen, the goal is not to reject technology, but to reject dependence. The Amish use the cupola and the gable vent because these are technologies that belong to the family, not a utility corporation. They can be built, repaired, and understood by the person who lives within the walls. True comfort is not just a reading on a digital screen. It is the feeling of a house that works in harmony with its environment. When you hang that $4 strip of cotton muslin and clear the obstructions from your gable peaks, you are doing more than lowering your electric bill. You are reclaiming a piece of common sense that was systematically stripped away to protect quarterly profits. The Amish did not preserve these secrets because they are smarter than the rest of the world. They preserved them because they refused to outsource their family's well-being to an industry that views comfort as a subscription service. This weekend, climb the ladder, look at your vents. See if your house is being allowed to breathe, or if it is being slowly suffocated by modern improvements. The path to independence is paved with small, inexpensive acts of defiancy, a bit of cotton, a clean screen, and the courage to trust the wisdom of those who built this country with their hands. The next stage of this journey involves an even deeper dive into the earth itself. We will be exploring a method the Amish use to maintain their root cellars at a constant 52 degrees year-round, a technique involving clay pipes and a principle of Swiss engineering from 1811 that requires zero electricity. I will see you there. Stay cool, stay curious, and remember, the people who built this world knew things we are only just starting to remember